But now let's start our segment Business of Governance. We have two guests who join us, Jay Panda, Member of Parliament at Lok Sabha, and Subir Gokarn, the Director of Research at Brookings India, join us on our segment Election Exchange Business of Governance. Gentlemen, good morning to both of you. Mr. Gokarn, first I want to start off with you. What is the agenda that you would like the new government, whichever government comes to power, to set as far as the fiscal situation is concerned? What are the 1, 2 or 3 rules that you would like the new government to set first up?
Well, speaking specifically about the fiscal situation, I think there are 3 issues which we need to get to grips with very quickly. One is clearly, what's really being talked about, which is the overall size of the fiscal deficit and the priority on containing it, bringing it back to what the FRBM roadmap from 2003 to 2008 had laid out, which is essentially trying to bring the revenue deficit to zero and using whatever you borrow to create assets. I think that's a very, very important restructuring that we need to see. But within the revenue deficit, really the problem over the last few years has been subsidies, and we have to find a way to contain subsidies. We had some reference in, I think, the budget of 2012 to a new FRBM, which actually would have an explicit cap on subsidies. Now, I think that's a good way to go. That locks in governments regardless of political orientation. And I think we need to move back to this more formal system of fiscal rules to try and get some predictability and some commitment into place. Very important element in this is the GST. I'm very much in favor of the GST. I think the benefits we saw from the VAT at the state level, which is a very sharp increase in revenue collection because of higher compliance, and that's really the important thing. Those will flow to the overall fiscal system, both center and states, through a GST rule, and I think that's very important. And I get back to my first point, which I think is the most important. In 2008, we had capital spending as a share of government expenditure at around 23%. It was spending almost a quarter of its total spend on asset formation. Today that number has gone down to 11 or 12 or somewhere thereabouts. So the government is spending way too much on consumption and way too little on asset formation. I think if we don't get that balance right, we're really compromising hugely on the kind of infrastructure requirements that we have that we need to fulfill in order to sustain a higher rate of growth.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Gokarn, for setting that agenda, but let's get Jay Panda in. Jay, thank you very much for joining us, but first up, what are the chances of the third front? I mean, until now, how many parties do you think can coalesce post-elections?
First of all, I think you need to keep in mind that every government for the last 25 years has been a coalition government. Yes. And the next government is also without a doubt going to be a coalition government. And what we've seen in the past 2 decades of getting used to coalition governments is that it takes 20 parties, give or take, to form a government. And sometimes I think an argument is made which is quite specious, that a third front government cannot provide the kind of governance that India requires. If you remember, Mr. Chidambaram, as part of the third front government in 96-97, presented what was called the dream budget, which took reforms forward. As far as the chances are concerned, I don't want to speculate. I think I'll leave that to pollsters and astrologers, and let's see how things turn out. But let's clearly understand that there are major challenges, no matter who is in charge of the government next year or after this election. Just a bit earlier, I was listening to your panel discussion, where we're talking about sort of accounting jugglery to show large chunks of expenditure which ought to be booked this year actually to be booked next year. And then on top of that, the sort of very lofty sounding target of bringing down the fisc from 4.8 to 4.2 is going to be a huge challenge for any government.
No, I take that, Mr. Panda, that there is a lot of jugglery and let's call it fudging. I mean, that's the word to use in terms of how the fisc is calculated. But let me tell you, it's not as if the opposition parties have been very kind or very responsible when the government tried to become more fiscally responsible. Ever so often in the first 4 years of the UPA2 government, government, when prices of diesel or any of the petroleum products were raised, a lot of the opposition parties which are today part of the third front or will be part of the third front have opposed it. This fiscally responsible steps which of 50 paise increase in diesel price got taken only lately. Earlier, any 2 or 3 price rise in diesel was opposed tooth and nail. That is exactly what I want to come to. If the third front comes in, would all your coalition partners be agreeable for a market price of diesel and curbing the LPG, subsidized LPG to maybe 9 or 10 cylinders? Do you think you all will give agreement on that?
First of all, let's see the context in the correct perspective. You talked about the opposition creating hurdles when the government gave the right signals, but I think all your viewers know that right throughout the entire tenure of this government, it has been at war with itself. If the government ever itself gave a consistent signal, that would have been the starting point for trying to bring around people in the opposition. But you know, even within this last few months, on the one hand, you've had Mr. Chidambaram cracking down very hard on expenditure to try and achieve the 4.8% number. On the other hand, you have the ruling party announcing largesse after largesse, and you just mentioned LPG. Where is the consistency in the government message? You cannot expect the opposition to cooperate with you if you yourself are not giving a consistent message. Now, coming to the third front, if at all it were to happen, let's understand, today what we have is a block of parties cooperating inside Parliament. Whether a third front will happen, how it will happen, I think we'll have to leave to the voters. If it were to happen, let's understand what is one of the biggest strengths. You would likely have a respectable person as finance minister who would not be burdened with extra constitutional authorities suddenly announcing whimsically policy decisions outside of Parliament and outside of government.
Interesting. That's interesting. Who do you think will be the finance minister? In fact, who do you think will be the prime minister?
No, I don't want to speculate. I don't want to speculate. First of all, I don't even want to speculate whether there will be a third front government. But clearly, I want you and your viewers to understand that there are hundreds of millions of voters in India spread across many states who are not voting either for the Congress or for the BJP even today. And you cannot simply ignore them and wish that they don't exist. So
Sure.
It is going to matter. Beyond that, I don't want to speculate about who's going to play what role.
Sure. So will you agree to the market price of diesel?
I think it will have to be negotiated. I personally would agree, but obviously in a parliamentary setup, irrespective of which, whether you have an NDA or a UPA or a third front, it will require internal negotiation. It will require give and take to achieve that consensus. Now, there are ways of doing that, but you cannot be doing that by sending inconsistent messages.
No, Mr. Panda, you know, the Trinamool